Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to view Chucky Season 2, Episode 7. I was kind of surprised that there's another episode coming the following week. I was like, man, this show, or this episode specifically, felt like a season finale. I thought that this show should have just ended on this episode, but no. For some reason, they're needing to want to tell us more story, and I'm like, okay, like, how can you top this episode? Good luck, but we'll see how that turns out. So, we have a little bit of Tilly story in this episode, but we're mainly focusing on the main story. The weirdest thing about this episode, I feel like, was like the opening of this episode, where all of a sudden everyone's just there, all simultaneously at the same time, and I'm like, wait a minute, like, since when is that person there? Wait a minute, how come? Like, wait, what? How is it that they're there already? Like, I just thought that there would have been, like, a more lead up to them getting there, but man, did they just rush them all into the scene together, and we then have certain characters like Father Price who's like, wait a minute, what's going on? So, this episode is to, of course, be a homage to The Exorcist, even to the point of them going on and saying certain lines that people will probably remember from the Exorcist film. And really, I think they had a lot of fun with this, and definitely was a great thumbs up episode. Compared to a lot of the other episodes, this one was freaking, like, just better out of all of them for this season. I don't know about season 1. I would have to probably go on and rewatch that whole season again and just be like, well, this episode might have just been better than all of those. Who knows? There were some fun moments in season 1. But anyways, so let's kind of tee this episode up. So we have Lexi, who is finally to succumb to her drug addiction, and I'm gonna really leave it at that, because we, of course, if we have to naturally assume that someone is dead, are they though? They can confirm it all they like. They can tell it like, oh no, that person is dead. Sure. But I like what they did there. I like what they did. Speaking of dead, we do actually have people who get killed off in this episode. What a massive surprise. But then when I again state that people are dead, you know what? For one person who does get killed off, I would state that that person, trying to be as vague as possible, I would like them to come back. They would probably need a hefty amount of prosthetics, or really go on and give us something drastically different. But still, like, I think at this point, like, to have that person come back would still be a welcomed thing, because really, for how much I kind of groaned about people just continuing to come back, I think we would also feel that person's absence, even if it was one season. So, like, I would be okay with that person coming back. Really kind of telling me, or kind of having you figure out what I'm saying here. But if you saw the episode, you know what I'm talking about. So, with that said, I kind of immediately figured out the ending before, like, they were to give me this kind of this ending, and I was like, oh yeah, like, obviously it's going this direction because contingency plans and all kinds of things. And I liked the confession parts, even though they did kind of slow down the episode. Especially Andy's. Andy's was really interesting. I think what they were to try with certain things here was really fun. So yeah, it was a great episode. Let's just go into spoilers so I can go on and just kind of gab and talk and whatever about all this stuff. It won't be perfectly in line like how the episode is, but I'm just going to be all over the place. I realize that because there's a lot of just small stories going on, and then I can get into the meat and potatoes of what's really going on. So I want to get to the small stories first, and then we'll get into the big, huge honking ones for this episode. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to double five this bad boy up, because I think it's about that time yet again to, of course, go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this episode. So, the small stories. So, Lexi and her finally succumbing to her drug addiction. So, Lexi goes on to, of course, take her drugs, and Lexi is doing this because she is so stressed out. Jake and Devin come to her and kind of inform her of what situation, or Devin and Jake are kind of with Lexi, kind of on the aftermath of Nadine dying, and so basically, we realized that Lexi without Nadine, like Nadine was kind of Lexi's Jiminy Cricket for a couple of episodes, where it seems that Nadine was trying to convince Lexi to like try to clean her act up. Was trying to convince her, it's like, oh no, like, well, like I've had certain family members in the past that had their problems, and so like, so yeah, so Lexi was trying to go on and try to clean herself up, but then as soon as she loses Nadine, her Jimmy Cricket, Lexi then goes on and takes the thing of medication that good Chucky was to give her from prior episode. So Lexi takes this medication, and all of a sudden she is to see, like, what would this be called? Like Wicked Witch of the West, Nadine? Like she looks like the one, like, good witch from Wizard of Oz, or she weirdly has these like wings also that you don't really see. And so Nadine comes to Lexi and is again trying to convince Lexi, like, well, hey, you don't need these drugs. Like, come on. Like, what have I told you from before? And so Lexi is again starting to realize that she is having a really bad trip. But again, Nadine in spirit form is convincing Lexi to get off the drugs. And so I'm kind of wondering if all of a sudden maybe Lexi may either slip into insanity, and then we'll continue to just see Nadine pop up from time to time, or maybe Lexi will continue on to like find this certain medication so she could have her Nadine time, which is very weird. But I don't know if they're really going to continue this story again, but it would also seem weird if Lexi does continue to take the drugs when, again, Nadine had come into her life as a spirit, as, like, the ghost of Christmas past, or whatever, or probably present. Like, present, like, the present, like, anyways, it is what it is. So, we have Nadine coming in to Lexi and convincing her off the drugs. So there's that little story. So now let's get into the Tilly story, because that seems to be fairly small also. So Tilly ends up going on to this seemingly diner or fast food joint and ordering a bunch of food. And conveniently, while all of a sudden this restaurant is to have a TV, because every restaurant and diner has a TV everywhere, right? They conveniently have on the television that Tilly, of course, is to be a murderer. That she had gone on to burn down her house. And I'm like, okay, I like how they kind of set up what had happened to Tilly, while, like, Tilly is also just kind of ordering this food, just kind of doing some mundane task. And so I like how they kind of, like, they set, like, what had happened to her home. And I was like, okay, that was actually a good idea. And so Tilly is ordering these burgers, and we all of a sudden have, like, one person who goes on like, "Oh my God, are you Jennifer Tilly?" And she's like, "Oh no, 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 no! Like I just look like her, and I'm a big fan, and this and that." So we all of a sudden have the person behind the counter is like, "Oh my God, you're the murderer! You're the murderer that was on TV." And instead of this guy going on and saying, "I should alert the authorities," no, this guy is like, "Well, hey, can we take a picture together?" And I'm like, "You want an ex-murderer or a kitchen knife murderer to take a photo with?" That is so bizarre, but also hilarious. So Tilly runs off, and she's like, "No, no, no, no! Like keep the change." And so we have Tiffany run off, and so Tiffany is now realizing that she needs to go on and switch places with Tilly, who is in the Tiffany doll, because she's like, "Well, yeah, if I can go on, like no one will realize that like I'm basically a murderer." Uh, so we of course have Tiffany, who's making these plans to like have her getaway strategy. So the weird thing of it is we had Tiffany that mentions that the only person or the only doll that she thinks that she can jump back into is the Belle doll. And so I'm like, so is that where they're heading to in the following episode? Are we going to have Tiffany get back into the Belle doll, and then she'll go on and be like possibly either Nika or somebody else in other episodes? Because wouldn't that be interesting if both Tiffany and both Nika were in the same body, even though again I would like Tiffany to like have some role. Still, it would be kind of funny to play around with that. But again, like we'll see where like that all plays out. But like if we're consistently rolling with the Nika needing to have like this this other soul inside of her, wouldn't it make sense to have Tiffany in there for a certain kind of moment of time? It would be funny to play around with that for a couple episodes and then get Tiffany out into another body. I don't know. We'll figure that out. So we have Glenda, who is with the Glen doll, and so we have, of course, Tilly in the back, and so we have Tiffany coming up with the idea that she wants to go on and switch bodies with Tilly. So Tilly's like, "Well, like, so you're gonna like put me back into the body of a murderer?" And so we have Tilly that goes on to run off at some point, gets kind of out of her ropes, out of her things that she was tied up to, because evidently these guys could not have thought of zip ties for a doll, I guess. Because when thinking about it, I just watched the No One Lives movie, and the guy was just like, "Haven't you guys ever heard of zip ties?" But so we have Tilly that runs off in doll form, and she all of a sudden gets careened by this this truck. And so Tiffany's like, "No," because Tiffany was thinking about all of the little doll shoes that she can wear, and like all of the times that she could like sneak up behind somebody without them knowing and kill them off. She's thinking about all these clever ways to go on and eventually like go after people. I think it would actually be fun to like bring back the Tiffany Chucky thing for like a whole season and like play around with that again, so that way we can all remember like the Bride of Chucky and so on and so forth. But then, because I'm assuming they would go on to give like a variety of different Tiffany dolls, more merchandising opportunities, and unless they're going to go on and do something with Belle by the end of this show, which we have to naturally assume that's where they're going. So, with that said, we have Tiffany and Glenn that are making their way back to, of course, Chucky's school, so that way they can track down Glenda and the rest of the family. And I'm like, how is it that Tiffany knows exactly where Glenda is? I'm so confused by that. Did she put a tracker on her? Like, that would have made all the sense in the world. Did Glenda tell Glenn the address of where they are? That would resolve a lot of things. Maybe it said somewhere in the show and I didn't catch it. But anyways, that's the second small story. So now let's go back to your regularly scheduled Chucky. So Batman. No. Anyways, so we have Chucky that goes on and chucks. Play on words. He goes on and chucks Nadine and has her fall to her death. They go on to confirm twice that Nadine is dead. The first thing they end up doing is having Dr. Mixter telling everyone that, yeah, she's definitely dead. So that way we confirm that death. And I'm like, good, but I don't believe it. Anyways, so Nadine is also being carried away via stretcher, and there's a kind of sheet overhead, so that is to also confirm death. But again, I am super suspicious. Because we've already had Lexi and Nadine in their Ghost of Nadine Past. And so now we, of course, have Father Bryce and Sister Catherine that are watching on as they haul away Nadine with this ambulance. And that would have been the perfect time for, like, Sister Catherine or Father Bryce to just be like, hey, there's some murderers in this church. Like, somebody help us out. And they didn't say anything. They didn't like, desperately ask for help. Because I felt that maybe they were obligated to any number of these people to be like, hey, man, like, if you don't come back here and... like, I'm gonna kill these kids. So, like, maybe they were constrained to just kind of do their duty, as we had Father Bryce that said the word duty in this episode, and I was like, he said duty. He said it. I am a child. Anyways, pushing on. So, we, of course, have Chucky that is all tied up, and we eventually get the Hannibal Lecter mask, which I thought was really cool. Another merchandise opportunity. Anyways. Hey, here's $5 extra for the Lecter mask. The accessory. Okay, great. Anyways. So, we go on into this episode. And so, Dr. Mixter is holding on to the somewhat good, somewhat bad Chucky. They tie him up in ropes and they sit him down on this table. I'm like, wouldn't he just jump right off that table and start hopping away? He probably wouldn't get very far, but like, this is Chucky we're talking about. Like, this doll ends up getting away way faster than we would ever naturally assume he would ever get away. Watch any number of episodes. So, but Chucky is to go on and try to be good Chucky, but he's also the evil Chucky. So, we have good Chucky trying to tell Jake, it's like, no, like, I really liked Nadine. Like, I didn't like, I didn't mean to kill her. And Jake is like, sure you didn't, sure you didn't. And so Jake ends up getting real close to Chucky, and that's when the light switches, and then evil Chucky goes and headbutts Jake, and it's to state like, yeah. So Andy immediately goes on and realizes, yeah, like, I don't think we can go on and trust this Chucky. So I think we're gonna really have to like make sure we can put him in some place that feels very secure. But we also have Dr. Mixter that is to realize that this Chucky is to, of course, not be as good as Chucky Prime, which is actually inside Nika. And again, we have Kyle and Nika who are to make it into the beginning of this. We have Kyle that turns to Andy and is to say, it's like, why do you look like Jesus? And Andy asks Kyle, it's like, why is your hair now brown? And Kyle's like, well, like, I didn't have as much fun as a blonde. And when honestly really thinking about it, with how many numerous times Kyle and Andy have gone on to kill numerous dolls, and probably with suspicions of them killing people or whichever, you would have thought it would have been like a good idea to have them change their identities at some point. It makes a lot of sense. And so also, I'm assuming that a lot of people were probably realizing that they're like, yeah, we didn't expect for us to come back, so that's the way we look. Because they naturally assumed that, like, maybe Kyle was to, like, grow out her hair, because she's like, I didn't think I was coming back, yada yada. And so, like, they didn't change it. They're like, no, like, don't change your hair. Or maybe she's wearing a wig, who knows? I also liked the fact that they brought it back to showcase the young Andy and the young Kyle, kind of bringing it back to the original movies again for that one little scene, just kind of reminding of us of the movies a little bit in this episode. But so, anyways, we have Sister Catherine and Father Bryce. And so Father Bryce is turning to Sister Catherine because Dr. Mixer has stated, it's like, okay, I think you guys are going to need to go on, and you're going to need to do a exorcism on this Chucky doll. Because we want his soul out, we want Chucky Prime in, and so Father Bryce, get to exorcising. So, speaking of exercising, man, does Devon Sawa look good. Just with the ribs, so to speak, in this episode. Like, gotta give him mad props, because a bulk of the time, this guy, of course, was to not be shirtless at all in this show, but now, like, when he is shirtless, he looks great. So good for him. Why did you say that? Who cares? It is what it is. So we go on to have Father Bryce that's with Catherine, and Father Bryce is telling Sister Catherine, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to need your help to have me figure out this whole procedure. And Father Catherine's like, great. So both of them are going in together, and so we have Father Bryce that calls the Vatican to mention about an exorcism, and I guess they just kind of laugh at him, or they just say, like, no. So they end up going on to excommunicate Father Bryce, which means that they're probably thinking, like, this guy has lost his rocker, like, we're going to go on and just state that maybe he needs some time away from being a priest. So Father Bryce is to give Sister Catherine the news to state that, yeah, like, they just told me I'm excommunicated, so we're going to do this anyways. We're going rogue. And so they end up finding this book called Exorcisms for Dummies, and so Catherine's like, this is what we're doing, and Father Bryce is like, yeah. So all of a sudden, Father Bryce, like, changes his clothes, get these robes on, and we see, like, the shirtless Devon Sawa, which I'm sure, like, when really looking at it, there was probably a time where Devon Sawa was like, hey, man, like, I've been really getting really, really in shape for the show. So how about you just give me one shirtless scene that actually you would have to write in and it makes sense? And they're like, yeah. Or maybe like Devin was like, hey man, if I ever need to be shirtless on the show, let me know. Because I know the guy who played like Spike on Buffy and Angel, he had to go on and tell the guys in the show, it's like, well, hey, like, if you need me to be shirtless on the show, give me a really big heads up because I want to really look good. Because there's a difference between like having a shirt on and looking good, and like being shirtless and looking like really like in shape. So they're like, okay, like, well, like you better get in shape now because you're gonna get this love scene with this character, and so you better like hit the gym hard. So it would be kind of cool to like see like how much Devin like was aware of how much time he really had to get into shape. Why am I going so much into this? Let's move on. So Devin ends up going on, or I'm sorry, Father Bryce goes on, and he's like, okay, let's do the Father Christ compels you. Let's go into this whole ceremony, and so we set up this whole ordeal, and we have a moment where we have Glenda who is talking with Chucky. So before the exorcism really gets down, I have to do up that scene. So we have Chucky again trying to convince Glenda. It's like, well, hey, I'm technically your dad. Like, you need to do what I say. And like the great thing that they do with Glenda is like, well, that's the thing about like you, dad, and mom. Like, you guys just want me to just do things for you, and like we finally have like Glenda that gets a backbone, and she's like, no, like if anything I'm gonna do here on out is to do it for me. So I thought that that was like really cool that Glenda is gonna go on, and Chucky is to mention that he hid a knife in a part of this church, and Glenda does go on to look for it, but she goes on to look for it for her own personal means instead of Chucky's. So we also had Father Bryce that was to tell everybody involved that they're going to go on and need to go into confession one by one to confess their sins. So that way they can all be cleansed. So when they go on and do this exorcism, like everybody who is kind of going on and doing this will have their conscience clear to be able to focus on this exorcism. So one by one, we start to have Father Bryce that brings people in. The one that I want to get to first is obviously Andy, because that was like a really good one. And so Father Bryce talks to Andy, and Andy is to mention that when Andy goes on and is to finally kill off every possible Chucky, Andy doesn't know who he will be if there is no more Chucky. And I thought that that was kind of like, that makes a lot of sense. This guy has been kind of with Chucky one way or another for a very long part of his life. Maybe not every movie, but still, this guy has been dealing with a Chucky some way or another. And so without it, it's kind of like if Bruce Wayne was to no longer be Batman, when looking at like Batman Returns, Bruce tried to give up being Batman, but then all of a sudden we go on to have Bruce's psyche that is forcing him to become Batman again, because Batman won't go on and let Bruce rest. It's like, no. Like, because Bruce is trying to go on and basically drive these race cars and almost get into these accidents. so that way Bruce can finally die and get rest. But again, we have the Batman that is going on whispering sweet nothings into Bruce, forcing him to state that it's like, well, like I won't allow you to not be Batman. You need to be Batman. So I'm wondering if Andy, if when he does go on, and it seems that all the Chuckies are dead, maybe we'll have Andy that goes crazy and then just becomes Chucky. And wouldn't that be interesting? Plus, if, sadly enough, if there were to have been a time when things were to happen where like the story just kind of gives up on certain things or tries other different kind of stories, then we can go into that route and maybe that'll be interesting enough for whatever reason. So moving on, I'm so really stretching this out. I apologize. So they go on into the exorcism, and I hope that I've kind of covered everything by now. So we have Father Bryce who goes on to do the exorcism, and we have Chucky who turns to Devin and tells Devin that your mother sucks Johnson in hell, let's just say. So Devin is to realize, because Chucky's really trying to figure out a way to pull off the whole like Thanos thing, when Thanos was being like kind of tied up by all these people, and we had one person, Star-Lord, who goes on and just hits Thanos and tries to kill him and whatever, and then everybody just kind of like, oh my god, we almost got the gauntlet. Like, this is almost the same situation that Chucky is trying to do with trying to take somebody off, so they will punch or they will kick or they will whatever, and all of a sudden we then have Chucky, of course, that might get away. So we also have Chucky that is reminding every death that was to happen in season 1 to Jake. It's like, well, hey, like, remember that I killed your dad? Remember I killed your mom? Remember I killed your uncle? And so Chucky is really trying here. And so we even get to a point where Chucky goes on and vomits on Father Bryce. And it's this green vomit, and it's like, well, of course, because Exorcist. So, like, it's, of course, we didn't go on into, like, the really gruesome scene of The Exorcist, where the girl is just going to with, like, a knife or sharp object or something, and, like, really hurting herself, and I was like, oh my god! That was a crazy scene in Exorcist. So, not only that, we don't have Chucky who turns his head all the way around either, so, like, we don't get that in this episode. But again, they probably couldn't have pulled that off. But it would have been funny, though, right? So, we have them keep going on and trying to exorcise this Chucky, this demon. And so we get to a point where all of a sudden, Chucky is now flying in the air as he's, like, telling everybody, like, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna kill you. So, Chucky's now flying in the air. I'm thinking, like, so this is the point where Chucky's just gonna go on an attack because none of this is really going to work. But instead, it seems to have worked somehow. And so now the Chucky doll is empty. And we also even had a moment where Chucky was to go on and bite Father Bryce's nose to, of course, have Nika turn into Chucky Prime, as we are to find out that, I guess, Nika has Chucky Prime within her. And, like, that was the whole thing about Chucky Prime, and I was like, okay, that was weird. So, we had Nika, who is to now be blindfolded this whole time, because she's like, hey, like, I don't want any blood for me to see, so just blindfold me now. Because Chucky Prime starts talking to Chucky, and so Chucky's like, hey, you want to give me a hand here? like, because I'm you anyways. And so we have Kyle that goes on and punches Nika in the face. And Nika's like, seriously? Like, you guys have to keep punching me and slapping me? Like, come on. So Nika just says, like, just tie me up. Just tell me what happens, but tie me up. So they tie her up, they blindfold her. So we have everybody going on and shouting and chanting and whichever. And so Chucky then is flying, and then the doll falls, and so Mika is to be asking everybody, hey, what happened? What happened? I don't know what's going on. And so I thought that was funny. But we come to find out that somehow Chucky's soul had went into Father Bryce. And Father Bryce is to start to sound like Chucky. I'm like, oh my god, like, either Devon Sawa is really good at being Chucky, or they just put in the Chucky voice. Because, like, man, that actually was pretty good. But, so Father Bryce goes on and is to be fighting internally with Chucky, to the point of now Chucky going to explode Father Bryce. And now Father Bryce is dead. All we see is his head. It's like, and that's all we see. And I'm like, oh my god, Father Bryce is dead. But again, probably after this season, where could they really go with this story? And how could they go on and continue to tie in Father Bryce into further parts of this? So it makes all the sense in the world to kill him off, so that way in the following season they can use him as some other character that ties well into the story. Because I'm okay with Devon Sawa continuing to be on this show, because I want him to continue to get work, because I like Devon Sawa. Like, I've seen a number of kind of Devon Sawa kind of stuff like that, like Final Destination, and like I had seen like Idle Hands like a while ago, but still. Either way, I saw some Devon Sawa. And of course, Casper. What does he say to Christina Ricci in that movie? Like, can I keep you? Is that what he says? Can I keep you? It's been a while since I've seen that movie, but I know in the beginning of it we have like Ghostbusters. We have Dan Aykroyd that comes in as a Ghostbuster, and he's like, "Who are you gonna call? Someone else." And it's like, it's been years since I've seen that movie. Yeah, you saw it yesterday. I bet you did, because you just like, you just love that movie. You just have a stiffy of that movie. No, I don't. But weirdly, there's just some stuff that just weirdly just sticks in there for some bizarre reason in my brain. Besides everything that happens in this episode, I'm sure. So, we still have the doll that seems to be intact. So, we have Nika that goes on to perform the ceremony that she's to go on and perform. It's kind of funny to, of course, realize that Nika, who is actually Brad's daughter, is performing this thing. And so it's very, like, it's so, like, full circle, and it's so funny that we've kind of had this where technically Nika has been also her dad in some points. And, like, gotta give it to Nika in this show. I really gotta give it to Fiona. Because I'm like, man, she's gone on and really done a lot of complicated stuff this season. And, like, really, if anybody goes on and really needs to really be getting, like, some kind of real, like, praise, it's gotta be Fiona in the season for how she's had to go on and do so many different things, a wide variety of stuff. So, even though we can also state that Brad has gone on to do a lot of stuff also, as far as voices and stuff for the show, still. So, let's go on. So, Nika goes on and transfers the soul of Chucky into this doll, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if actually Nika was in the doll and Chucky was still in Nika? That would have been funny. I would have laughed at that. I think that's what they should have done to do a joke, but writing wise should have been the way it been. So right after Chucky's now in that doll, and Chucky's like, well, hey, I'm back, we have Jake that grabs the doll, shoves it into the holy water, trying to drown it, and we have Chucky every time he gets splashed with holy water, it burns him as if he is the devil. So Jake is shoving this doll into this water, and I'm like, man, this kind of reminds me of like Rawhead Rex, because like Rawhead Rex was like this big, huge monsterish thing, but it had like a lot to do with like a church and stuff like that. Like Rawhead Rex just like it seemed so similar to this season, even though like Rawhead Rex is a big, massive Irish monster for whatever goofy reason. But still, check out that review or just check out that movie because that movie was actually pretty fun. There's some goofy things in it, but still fun. Anyways, so we go on to have Sister Ruth come in with Lexi, because we have Sister Ruth that finds Lexi with these drugs, and Sister Ruth tells Lexi, it's like, well, hey, these things will kill you. And I'm like, that just reminds me of like a couple of nights ago I went on and saw like Never Back Down, and the guy is like, the sauce, that'll kill you. So Lexi's like, well, hey, like, I'm sorry, like, whatever punishment I'm gonna have to take. But so Sister Ruth just takes Lexi to go into the church because Sister Ruth is going to use Lexi as a bargaining chip. So we have Sister Ruth that has a weapon on Lexi to bargain to trade Chucky for Lexi. And so everybody's like, hey, don't do it. And we go on to have Jake who's like, no, like, Lexi has become like a valuable friend, and so like let's definitely go on and like let's save her. It's the right thing to do. So Jake goes on and undunks Chucky from this water, and Chucky ends up telling Jake, it's like, man, like I didn't know you had it in you, Jake. And also, like, Chucky makes a crack about, like, both Devin and Jake's, like, bedroom business, and is to say, oh, like, you guys haven't done it yet. Oh, okay. So, really having us go on and, like, kind of poke fun at the Devin and Jake relationship, where it kind of feels like this season, like both of them, like the relationship was really on the rocks. And even to the point where I think Jake tries to go on and talk to Devin. And like I think Devin is kind of having some distance between Jake. But so, I guess we need to also get into some other confessional moments because I only went into Andy's. But let's kind of finish this part up though. So, Chucky hands off the doll to Sister Ruth, but then Glenda comes in with his knife and flings it and hits Sister Ruth right perfectly in the eye and kills her off. As Sister Ruth pulls out the knife and has the eye on the end of the blade, Sister Ruth then falls down and is dead. We, of course, have the Chucky doll that runs off, and we have Dr. Mixter that is grabbing onto him and running off as well. But we get to a moment where, of course, Andy is running with this gun, because definitively Andy has to be the one to kill off Chucky here. It can't go on and be like Jake, which actually would have made a lot of sense to kind of switch it up, because it feels like Andy has gone on and killed a number of Chucky dolls in this show so far. But I get the symbolism of Andy killing off this doll, but I really should think that some other people should start to get some kind of like rotation in here, or other people should start killing off these Chucky dolls much more so than Andy. But it could also be just like, well, like Andy's an adult, this guy is still this age, yada yada yada, so I can understand maybe that aspect of it, of like have the adult do all the killing, and then at some point when the kid becomes of a real whatever age, then hand off to like, okay, you're going to be the next person who goes on to kill off all these dolls. And so Andy goes on to shoot off the jaw of the Chucky doll, and then Dr. Mixer drops the doll and runs off. And so we start to have Andy that just continues to shoot into this doll, and Chucky's just like, ah! And so we see a number of bullets going into the chest, but not a single one of them really going into the head. And so that's what I was expecting. But again, like, I guess the whole rest of the body just kind of getting kind of pelted here makes a lot of sense. And then the visual of just Chucky just kind of falling with his tongue like out is a good symbol or a good visual here. So let's also get into confessions. Let's do some portions of that. I don't think there was any like real confession with like Devin. Like, I don't think they really had much for him to go on and legitimately confess. Jake goes on and confesses to Father Bryce at the very beginning of this episode, and he is to go on and confess. And Father Bryce is like, well, like, this is some unusual times, so like, I'll take in any kind of confession that you have. And so Jake is to go on and state that he was to have killed people. And you can state that Jake probably didn't kill all of these people, but then again, with Jake having Chucky with him and all of those people died, while Jake having Chucky, like, technically there is some share of blame there. Or really just having Jake get that doll in the first place could make him a murderer in his own mind. So it's like, oh, okay, all right. So like him just deciding to get that doll spiraled into Jake being a murderer and feeling guilty this whole entire season. So we also have Nika that goes on to confess about all of the anger that's inside of her, all of the pain that she has been dealing with having to be with Tilly, and also having Chucky inside of her. And so we have Father Bryce that states it's like, well, like, maybe like what you're dealing with could also be considered a sin. Like the anger that you have just brewing inside of you could also be like a sin of sorts. So, and Nika's goal is to just finally get it out of her so she can finally move on. So we have Kyle that goes in, and she of course confesses. And like, I don't think there is anything like really significant from her confession, in all honesty. Anything really of note, sadly enough. Glenda goes on and confesses that she maybe had killed somebody. And she is to go on and have these kind of dreams and so on and so forth. And so the father's like, okay, like, we'll count that as... So I think we even get to a point where Father Bryce goes on and confesses his sins to Sister Catherine, and Catherine goes on and does the same. Because Father Bryce's state is like, well, like, this seems like unusual times and so on and so forth. So, like, I guess we all have to go on and have, like, some cross to bear here. So now we've gone on and killed Chucky. Chucky is supposedly dead, Chucky Prime. And so we're thinking, oh no, there's no more Chuckies, right? So come to find out, there is one real confession to state here. And this is from Dr. Mixter. And so Dr. Mixter is to go on and talk to Father Bryce, and I will get to the Tiffany stuff. I'll get to that. Like, I realize I have to go on and state that. I'll get to that. So we have Dr. Mixter who goes on and talks to Father Bryce, and is to state that she is to go on and have a confession herself. And what this confession really just does reveal is that there is a Chucky inside of Dr. Mixter, and Dr. Mixter starts laughing as Chucky, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of figured that all along because, like, or I kind of figured that once we got towards the end of this episode. I'm like, there has to be a reasoning why this doctor is to easily help out all of these Chuckies and why they haven't killed her off. And now we understand why by the end of this episode. But so, we have Tiffany and we have Glenn and Glenda that reunite and they're hugging one another. So, we have Nika that meets up with Tiffany, and Tiffany's like, "Oh my god, Nika!" Like, and so finally, as Nika is to state that she is to want to finally resolve her having Chucky out of her life, we still have unfinished business with Nika. So Nika whips out this gun with her Iron Man arms, and or Iron Woman arms. Let's state this correctly. Uh, so Nika goes on and whips out her arm, and it's have a gun attached to it, and we now have Glenda who's like, "No, don't kill my mom," and or we have Glenn who's like, "No, don't kill my mom," and Nika's like, "No, like I have to go on, I have to like." So what ends up happening is Glenn ends up taking the bullet for her mother, or for Glenn's mother, my bad. So we now have Glenn that's bleeding out. And so I'm assuming like doll transfer? Glenn is going to have to go back into the Glenn doll. That's what I'm naturally assuming, because this person is probably going to die, so that's what they're going to do. Because they had that doll there for a reason, and also that will also save us from having to have two different versions of the same person. So, even though I liked Watson like doing these double performances, and I think how they like pulled it off was pretty good. I think it'll probably also be refreshing to just have like have me not be confused which one was Glenn and which one was Glenda, because I always would get those kind of names confused. But either way, I'll probably get them confused anyways. So we now, because Glenn had been shot, Nika does not kill off Tiffany, and they're now grabbing Glenn to rush Glenn off to the hospital. I would have just rushed Glenn off to the doll, but that's just me. So that's how everything just kind of ends here. That's all that I want to go on and cover. So I'm going to try and get the heck out of here. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I missed. We have one episode left of this season, so for whatever happens, if anything is to go on and be a miss through this season, I honestly think I've gone on, like, I'm surprised on how well that I actually probably remembered everything and reviewed this show, because there was a lot going on in this season. And also, like, I was to have probably messed up certain information in the first season, just because I couldn't see stuff clearly, or there was obvious mistakes to be made. So I feel like at certain points, depending on how long this channel really lasts, because there could be just a ticking time bomb of me just probably thinking that it's going to get to a point where things are going to stop working or work out, and then I may not be here for a while, or I may not be here whatsoever. I don't know. So, for technical reasons, not reasons of me just wanting to go on and be like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. So, we'll see when that course happens, because if you have not have gone on and watched my update video, because nobody really tends to do those kinds of things, then yeah. So we'll see how this goes. For some goofy reason, I was to technically have uh, Wi-Fi for who knows how long. So we'll see if that sticks around. Because I've been going on and taking 6 hours to upload a video, sometimes 9 hours, sometimes a whole day and a half. So I'm not being lazy, believe me. I'm just going on and crazily enough, not really sleeping to try and get a video out. So that said, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.